I think a lot about our experience raising money and some of the counterintuitive things that we learned in that process. Not that by any means we are experts, but I guess we have more experience than most people in doing it. We have together raised and managed over $10 million of venture capital. I haven't tallied it up lately, but somewhere between $10 and $15 million worth of money. That's no small feat.
No. Most people never take the step to start the company, let alone raise multiple rounds of funding.
In case that's interesting to people, what to you jump out as having gone through that a few times, what are the least obvious like what are the things that surprised you? What are the things that were harder than you expected? What are the things that were easier than you expected?
I think the main thing, and this is, going from naive about it to fully aware of it. And what I'm going to say, we're going to decide whether or not we want to include this. But sort of the mismatch between VC marketing and actual VC decision making.
Yeah. There's a lot of daylight between those two things.
Yeah. So, anybody who's gone to any VC's website has seen the "we back visionary entrepreneurs sometimes with nothing but an idea on a napkin, and we take bold risks and we do all this stuff, and it is just not matched up with the way I see decision making being run at most venture capital firms.
Yeah, we've talked about this before, and I want to zoom in on it for a second because I can't decide if I was naive in thinking that the marketing for anything was aligned with the reality of anything. I don't think I'm naive. I think when I see an advertisement for a juicy cheeseburger and then I go to the restaurant, either the cheeseburger approximates my expectations and I'm a happy customer and I go back. Mm-hmm. Or they switcherooed and I get a mouthful of sand and then I am upset and I don't go back to that establishment. Mm-hmm. You would think there would be some market economic incentive for any entity or institution for their marketing to align as closely as possible with their reality.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's naive to think that they'll ever be exactly one-to-one. In fact, I don't know that ever could happen. Mm-hmm. Marketing is sizzle and sex, and it's the ability to help your customer envision themselves as the best version of themselves with your product or your service.
And VCs do a fantastic job of that.
Yeah, I think they do. But I'm trying to think, but the reality is so far away. And I don't mean to disparage the field. I certainly hope I'm not doing that. I've met some fantastic investors that I consider close personal friends even today, even after I've been unsuccessful in returning their investment.
Yeah.
And yet the experience of fundraising and seeing the decision-making process as it seems to really be is very interesting. So how would we articulate that to a young person that's never done that and is perhaps thinking about going out and pitching their idea, their prototype, their company?
I think the decision making generally falls in three buckets when you're raising money. There's either you have a lot of hype, hype meaning either your company in particular has a lot of hype, you're in a market sector that has a lot of hype, and therefore venture capital is desperate to get into either specifically your company or your sector, and they're willing to entertain almost anybody who shows up from either your company or your sector. There's metrics, which is like, hey, it's not sexy, but the growth is off the charts, and I'd be a fool not to invest in this company. And then there's everything else, which is basically no, right? Like if you're not satisfying one of those two things, you're a no. So there's basically three buckets you'll fall into. And I can't imagine most of the venture, both deals that we've done and failures to raise that we've done have sort of followed that same pattern, right? It's either it's usually some combination of You're not in an interesting market. Your growth is not fast enough, and that's why you're in the no bucket. And because you don't fall into either of the two other buckets.
Yeah.
Really, and it has nothing to do with how innovative you are. It has nothing to do with what kind of entrepreneur you are, how much grit you have. It never seems to ever have, because that's what I mean by the sort of like differentiate. You know, it's so different from what the marketing presents of like, we're taking risks even if it doesn't make sense. If it doesn't look like a good idea now on paper, like we believe in the entrepreneur. I haven't really seen that.
Yeah, the marketing seems to be that VCs wants the culture to view them as like intrepid explorers that are going out into the garages of Menlo Park and Redwood City and like scouring every garage for that one overlook neck-bearded engineer that just needs a chance, and they're going to invent cold fusion, change the world. Everyone's going to get rich.
Yeah.
That's I think what they're selling.
Yeah.
And
I'm not saying that none of them do that, by the way. There's some that go out of their way to look for
Sure.
for uncut gems, right?
Yeah. Yes. There's a whole I'm getting weird here. I'm going to probably post-it note this for a later discussion, but I think it's fascinating the influence Hollywood has had on Silicon Valley.
Interesting. What do you mean by that?
By that I mean, I can't help and look at the way Andreessen Horowitz has grown. Mm-hmm. They're very good investors, but there are other very good investors that have not engaged in the shock and awe strategy of venture capital investment, of building a platform team, of acquiring media companies.
I was going to say the media is probably the biggest part of that.
And it is the closest thing I can think of to it is the package strategy of, I think it was CAA, Creative Artist Agency. I think I got to do some homework on the history of this. But if I'm remembering correctly, it was a huge innovation in the 80s and 90s in Hollywood for the agency to be so big it is impossible to ignore. Mm-hmm. Where you take the funnel of talent and you widen the top of it so big that nothing can escape it. Yep. It becomes an event horizon.
Yep.
And you end up seeing every deal.
Yep.
Because you're so big. Mm-hmm. It's a strategy.
Yeah.
And it seems to me that Andreessen Horowitz is running that same playbook 20 years later.
Yep.
Outside of Hollywood. And I might be wrong. The metaphor or the comparison might be inexact. But if there's any instructive power or accuracy to what I'm saying, it's fascinating because I think it's exhibit C in a long list of ways in which California, which has this multipolar influence, where Hollywood and entertainment and Silicon Valley and invention and technology have started to collide and merge and influence each other in ways that I think a lot of people don't really articulate very clearly.
What I don't know what they would say, but it might not even be deliberate, right? It could be that it's
like
sort
a convergent evolution.
It's sort of like convergent evolution of just like it works to
carcinorization.
Carcination.
Carcination. I overdid it.
Is it the it's the fact that crabs have evolved.
I imagine Mark Andreessen with crab pies.
But yeah, but I don't know for sure, but I would imagine it's possible that they did not study CAA and say, oh, that's an interesting strategy, but we're going to apply that to venture. It's just that if you're big enough, why not do that?
Yeah. It seems to me, though, that they have been executing a deliberate strategy of becoming so big that nothing can fall outside their net and they see everything.
Yeah. So they basically get right.
That's interesting.
They get right of first refusal on almost every deal.
Exactly. I would think so. I'm not inside.
Sure. I'm.
And I imagine that's a very expensive strategy, but it is logically a sound strategy.
Yep.
And it's really interesting. I am digressing though, because the original thing we were talking about is
like what are things that were surprising.
Exactly.
In the fundraising process.
And there's a subject that I didn't think we were going to talk about right now, but why not? And that is, I've had this observation rattling around the back of my head for a long time. And I've checked it with you. I've checked it with people I trust in the investment world. I think good entrepreneurs are always desperately looking for market signal. The game, the key seems to me to be, how do I remove every distraction and every extraneous piece of information to get as close as I can to customers and understand what they need and give it to them faster, better, cheaper, or more effectively than you've gotten it before. And this is a signal, a heartbeat that we are trained over time to feel even scared and adrift when we're not getting it.
Oh, yeah.
I think good founders, and I think we in our prime, we've talked about this. We go more than a week without talking to a customer, and we start feeling like a little jittery or like a little.
We have lots of real stories we can get into.
Yeah,
about the times that's happened.
Feeling antsy, and I think that's good. That's a good anxiety.
Yeah.
When it comes to fundraising, though, a customer, assuming you can get a customer's attention, there is a very rational, especially early on, there's a very rational cost-benefit, or not cost-benefit analysis, a very rational incentive alignment. Mm-hmm. You either are or are not accurately perceiving the need of the customer. That's logic gate number one. Are you even perceiving the problem? And if you are, have you built something that even partially satisfies that need or solves that problem? Mm-hmm. And if you do, and the price is right, someone will pay for it. And if you don't, they won't.
Yeah.
There's that line that I can't stop thinking about from that book, The Mom Test. Everyone's a liar until you ask them to take out their wallet.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. There's no shame in it. In fact, I feel like it's a superpower of practicing it enough times, of asking someone to take out their wallet, that I don't feel as often or as acutely that shame or fear that comes from our culture. And really, I just quickly get to an understanding of whether or not there's an alignment of incentives. But here's where I'm going with the venture capital fundraising. Uh-huh. The same alignment of incentives does not exist. There's a prisoner's dilemma problem between investors and founders. Because when you pitch a product to a customer, the customer, unless you catastrophically lose their trust, the customer is going to think, does it solve my problem and is the price right? If the answer is no, it's clear. There's always a chance later to come back and to reassess at a later stage. When you're a founder, the product, to some extent, is the trust of the founders and the operators in the company. It's a much more social thing. Like, yes, technically the product is equity or a guarantee of future equity in a legal contract. Okay, fine. But the problem to be solved is not as clear as the problem to be solved with a customer. You have a customer and they've got a nail in the wall and you say, I've got a hammer. Do you want to buy it for $3? And they will say yes or no. But with an investor, you are selling a vision of a future hammer factory that can reliably churn out hammers. And the investor does or does not believe that story. And they do or do not invest. And then the founder takes that money and does or does not build the factory of hammers. And there is or is not a return on the investment. But the delicate balance, this is the prisoner's dilemma, is that the founder's relationship to the investors is the market. There is no open market for equity in your private company. There's no open market for it. It's not like people on a corner can bid for shares in your company. The only way those investors get access to that potential asset is through you. And they don't want to piss you off. So they will go out of their way to not give you direct feedback.
Yep.
When they pass on your company.
Yep.
Because they want to preserve optionality.
Yep.
In the future, in case they're wrong about you and you do have the next Airbnb. They want to retcon your seed round experience and say, I knew it all along. I was just strapped, or I'd already made all my investment quotas for the calendar year, or whatever the answer that they give you is.
Yeah.
Rightly or wrongly, you don't have perfect information. You don't know if they're lying to you, and they know that.
Yeah.
So they can blow you off, and here's the sticky problem, and not give you direct and actionable feedback on improving your business. But back to the very nature of founders. We are trained to look for signal on how to improve our products or services.
Yep.
So I'm identifying, and it's something I really can't stop thinking about, this fundamental misalignment is a game theory misalignment between investors and founders, where founders just want clear and actionable feedback. And investors have an incentive to withhold that in order to preserve optionality for future investment in the company. I've been talking too long. React to that.
I'm good. Well, I agree with the dynamic, the description of the dynamic that you've given, right? Which is that most investors are never going to give you, some will never give you even a straight up no. They'll be like, if you can get a lead, I'm in, right? Like they're waiting for, it's the middle school dance problem. They're waiting for somebody else to step onto the dance floor because they don't want to be the one sticking their neck out for you.
Yeah. Because that signal for them, that de-risks their investment.
That de-risks their investment. There's other people that see something. Maybe they don't see something, but somebody else does, and maybe that's a person that they trust. So they're gonna jump when somebody else does, right? I also slightly disagree with the characterization that it isn't as clear of a value prop that the investor is looking for. The value prop's pretty straightforward, right? I need to know that I'm going to put money in your company now, or not know. I need to have a reasonable assumption that if I put money in your company now, somebody else is going to buy my equity in your company for much more money later, right? And the way that they get that signal is what the buckets I described, right? It's either you're in a very hypey sector, your company itself is very hyped up right now, or you have metrics that are going gangbusters that they just can't deny. Yeah. Like your users are growing, are doubling month over month, or your revenue's doubling month over month, or something to show them that it's like, okay, this may be the beginning of the hockey the hockey stick curve, so I got to get on now. Yeah. So they do have a specific product that they're looking for. So those are the two things that I would like push back on. But other than that, I agree. Like there is a weird, there is a dynamic where it's like, yes, and it's a mismatch, and it's sort of like a switch you have to move back and forth on as an entrepreneur. The muscle that you're exercised when you're talking to customers and trying to grow your business as fast as you can is not quite the same one you need to be using with investors. Yeah. Because the signal you're describing that you're not getting is exactly the mismatch.
And that's, I think, a really important point. If we're talking to our younger selves here on this podcast, the cognitive load of understanding that dynamic in the first place and then switching is much harder than it seems. Yeah. When you're a founder, assuming you are raising investment, which is not always the right path, we can talk about that later. You are really selling, you're kind of selling three things. You're selling a product or service to a customer. You are selling a vision to future and current employees and teammates. Yep. And you are selling an equity to an investor. And keeping those signals isolated and optimized is a very difficult game, and is, in my experience, is just one of the most deceptively complicated and difficult things I've ever done, and I've succeeded in some ways and failed in others.
And then what's the thing that we like to say all the time, that everything's a fractal? Within each of those three things, it's like an infinite amount of complexity that you have to deal with. Yeah.
So I want to flag this, I guess, maybe as a lesson to ourselves in the past. One, something that you said earlier that's really important. When you're fundraising, you're meeting 100 investors, you are not courting 100 investors. You are looking for one lead. Yeah. Your job is to find the one lead. Yep. Another related lesson is that FOMO is the most powerful force on earth. And understanding, I think the third thing is, this is a really controversial one, but I think it's really true. Once you've been a founder that has successfully raised some money, then you get the real trap, which is, let me say this simply, building for investors instead of your customers, which is a natural, it's a benign impulse, I think. Because I think subconsciously or consciously in your head, you're thinking, one, these are smart, experienced people,
Yeah.
and I trust them,
Yep.
ideally, and I really value their input.
Yeah.
Two, if I need more money in the future, I might need them.
Yeah.
And I need to make them feel bought in
Yep.
and part of this process, which
Yeah.
is actually maybe the mirror image of the thing I was saying a minute ago, of the VCs not being able to give direct feedback to founders for fear of closing future
Yeah.
optionality.
Yep.
Founders, quote unquote, selling to investors instead of their customers is maybe optionality preservation for the future. I got to think about that more.
Yeah.
But I've seen so many founders that have succeeded in the level of the video game of raising money and then go haywire building for investors instead of their customers.
Yeah. Going out for signal from VCs for what you should build, probably the worst way you could build a company.
Yeah.
And so this topic also dovetails nicely with something we mentioned earlier, which is the idea that venture is not right for most businesses.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think, and sometimes it's hard to tell whether or not your business is right for venture when you're at the beginning. But the moment you take venture, then you're on the train and you can't really get off of it until you either succeed or the company implodes.
So if you were a time traveler and talking to yourself at the age of, when we started PocketList, how old were you?
I was
30?
30. Yeah.
Okay. So you go back in time to your 30-year-old self. You've never raised money. You've never started a company. What's the lesson you give yourself related to what you just said? Related to not all businesses, not all companies are a fit for venture capital as a financial vehicle, as an investment vehicle.
That's a good question. Because I don't know. Because I am putting myself in my shoes at the time, and it's really hard to tell.
Do you think PocketList, do you think the shape of the business, our hypothesized business model, our hypothesized product was a fit for venture capital?
I think the hypothesis as we constructed it at the beginning may have been. I think we found out that it probably wasn't.
Yeah. I think if COVID hadn't kicked in,
Well,
we
see,
still would have had trouble going from Series A to Series B, right?
Yeah, I don't know that that business, as we like I said, with the caveat that is as we hypothesized it at the beginning when we raised money.
Yeah.
I think that I think at that time it would have made sense, but given that it turns out that the business model just didn't work,
Yeah.
means that it wasn't a venture business.
I disagree. I think PocketList had all of the shape of the right type of business for venture capital financing. But I only arrive at that conclusion after a lot of going back and forth over the years. And certainly I didn't know what I know now when we first fundraised. So let's talk a bit about, let's talk a bit because maybe we even disagree a little bit about what the traits of a company that should be raising venture capital financing, and like, what does that look like?
It has to be a business that can grow like almost uncontrollably,
Yeah.
right? Like it has to be able to,
Like plausibly, your product should be able to serve 1 in 10 people on the planet.
yeah, something like that, right? Like there are venture businesses that end up being, let's call them doubles or triples, that are successful business. They're hugely successful businesses. But I have a feeling if you ask the VCs that made the investment into the company, they would say that's not. We're looking for 500, 1,000 X returns. We're not looking for even 100 X returns are not enough to justify the investments that we're making. So like even if you were to do a double or a triple, I'm using baseball, sports metaphors.
It's a common, it's also
Just to be clear for anybody who might be listening, wondering if it's like a revenue multiple or something that I'm talking about. No, it's just a baseball metaphor.
And
like
to note for young people, it is a common mental model for used in fundraising.
Yeah. So if you're hitting a double or a triple, that's not like, and if that's what you're pitching. So actually, that's a good lesson. If you think pitching something that will be a double or a triple, and not a home run or a grand slam,
You're going to get passed on.
you're going to get passed on. Like it has to be the vision, and the person you're pitching has to believe that they're investing in something that will return 1,000 times the money they're putting in.
Yeah.
Especially seed round, right? Seed round is like you're getting in so early, taking so much risk that it needs to be at least 1,000x return.
Yeah.
Or they have to believe that it's possible for them to get 1,000x return from the investment.
Yep.
Otherwise, they're just going to pass on you. So if you're talking about like, oh, we're going to grow 30% every year, and that's a good business. I'm not saying that's a bad business. It's not a venture scale business.
Yeah.
And so getting back to PocketList, I think like the original hypothesis we had. So let's talk about PocketList. So do you want me to pitch it, or do you want to pitch it?
I talk too much. You can pitch it.
All right. So PocketList, for those listening at home, was an apartment hunting app at its core, right? It was a way for you to find a place to live. The twist that we gave it was it's a give to get social, almost like a social network.
Almost like Glassdoor, right?
Like a Glassdoor for apartments, where it's like, okay, any given person who's living in an apartment is an expert on that place now, probably knows more about what it's like to live there than the landlord, the person that actually owns the place, knows about the apartment. And two, they know a very, very important piece of information that nobody else knows, including the landlord, which is when they're thinking they're going to be leaving the apartment. So most people, when they're starting to look, they start looking at listings probably 3 months before they're about to leave, just to get a feel for where they might end up, what kind of things they're looking for. So, but that's a 3-month window that most landlords don't even know it exists until and basically they mostly get a 30-day window where it's like, hey, I'm leaving in 30 days. And so PocketList, the idea was, 3 months ahead of time that you're looking for a place. So we're going to give you access to this network of listings of other people who know they're going to be leaving in the near future. And in exchange, what you have to give is your date of where you're planning on leaving and the details about your apartment and where it's at, how much you're paying for it, what is it like. Give us details about, are the neighbors noisy? Do trash trucks drive through your street constantly? Any sort of quality of life things that you can tell us about.
Yeah, I want to interject here.
Yeah.
Most real estate networks operate purely on quantitative data. And we were adding a lot of qualitative data.
Yes.
That nobody had.
That nobody else had.
We were finding, and exploiting is a bad word, and I don't mean that in an exploitative way, but we were finding and leveraging an information asset that nobody had ever leveraged before, which is the knowledge of the departing tenant.
Yeah. And this was a novel idea. I mean, I think that we may have found one or two other things that were kind of similar to it that had been tried before but sort of fell apart, but they weren't exactly PocketList. Now, the trick to it that we figured out that I think is why it looked like a venture scale business at first was the cost of user acquisition that we figured out. That was one of the things that was like the major.
Not only that, yes, that was important, and I want you to elaborate on that in a minute, but also I want to remind you that it wasn't just the cost of user acquisition, it was the cost of inventory acquisition.
Right, yeah. Yes.
So for those of you...
on the surface you may think is the same thing, but it's kind of distinct.
Right, so let's walk through that, right? If I'm selling a baseball hat on a Shopify website, and the hat is for sale for $50, and I acquire the user through a Google AdWord campaign, and I acquire them for $20, and they successfully buy a hat, then I have my customer acquisition cost is $20. And if they never buy the hat ever again, like if they never buy anything else with my store ever again, then my customer lifetime value is $50, the value of the hat. And my CAC to LTV ratio is 1 to 2.5. 1 to 2.5?
Right.
2.25?
2.5 to 1. That's what you're looking for.
There we go. Yeah, sorry. You have the engineering degree. What was interesting about what we were doing is saying, yes, we're acquiring a user, and that sometimes costs money. We can drive that down with marketing, brand, great user experience, word of mouth, gamification. There are a lot of ways we can drive that down, but we are acquiring users. But first of all, when a renter, especially a young renter, is onboarded, that young person will change apartments an average of 8 times over 10 years before they buy their first home. And these are American national average numbers. Mm-hmm. And I need to double check. It's been years, but I'm pretty confident that I remember these numbers. So that's thing number one. Thing number two, they're not buying a hat, which is a perishable physical good, that once the company that makes the hat sells the hat, it's done. That transaction's over. Once that user tells us about the unit of inventory that they're leaving, we now have the best data about that unit forever until that unit gets bulldozed, which does not happen very often. Meaning that unit of inventory, it's an apartment in Santa Monica that's renting for $2,500 a month, right? There is a theoretical asset value to understanding that and leveraging that data to help market and turn the unit. That's real money for a landlord, real money for a property management company, real money for a tenant in some circumstances. And doing that repeatedly makes for a very compelling customer lifetime value or listing lifetime value analysis. So I just wanted to remind you and remind me and share with our listeners some of the very novel framing behind this.
Now, that's where we get into, so that, in my opinion, that's where we get into where our assumptions were wrong. And I think that was, so one was, so there was the cost to acquire a unit of inventory. That was interesting, right? That was we found, we had, Justin Turner was our head of marketing. He was brilliant. He figured out great, very cost efficient ways for us to run campaigns, to find people who were currently in the process of finding an apartment and were willing to share that data with us. But I think where things, so it was really the other side of it where things fell apart, right? Because that was, so our assumption was, that's great that we can do that. That's a great user experience. Like that's fantastic. The assumption was we'd be able to turn that around and build a revenue generating business that was basically getting the landlords of these apartments to be our customers as a marketing, as their marketing channel for their units. It's basically to remind.
It's a B2B sales.
Like the reverse side of this, basically, the way the experience worked was a person would come on, share the information about their apartment. Other people who are on the platform who are also looking for places who have given their information to get access to inventory would signal, I'm interested, I'm interested, I'm interested. And then on the backside, the idea was we would be able to go, once the tenant had given notice, we would be able to go to the landlord and say, hey, landlord, you were renting to this person for 3 years. They were, they're very happy with the apartment. It's a very nice unit. You've taken good care of them. You're not a slumlord from what we've seen in the data that we've gathered from this person. And by the way, we have a list of 12 people who are already interested and have agreed to have their information shared with you.
Yeah.
And you can basically shrink your vacancy window from 15 to 30 days down to 7 days if you want to.
My memory was that the original hypothesis behind the business model was one that was very sane because we've seen it in the wild many times before. And that was Yelp. It was claim your inventory and access the data and manage your reputation, right, on this information resource or website, right? And looking at Yelp, that wasn't on its face a bad idea. It was really hard to sell. Why was it hard to sell? I think it was hard to sell because, let's look at Yelp really quickly. First of all, many people think that's a misalignment of incentives. So I think it is too, kind of.
Real quick, was it, are you remembering that this was the original hypothesis?
Yes.
And then we pivoted to what I described?
Yes, exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
The original
I do remember the Yelp thing. I just couldn't remember if it was one of the later pivots.
No, it was one of our early pivots. The early pivot was, will a landlord spend $100 a month to claim all their properties and see a bunch of data and get signal on, quantitative and qualitative ways to improve their management of their properties. That was a really hard sell. Why was it a hard sell? I think it was a hard sell because, let's look at Yelp really quickly. What information is Yelp aggregating? It's aggregating reputational and kind of inventory information about, let's keep it simple for now, small businesses. Let's keep it simple to like restaurants, because I think that's where they started, although you can go on Yelp and look up bike shops and all kinds of stuff. But let's just simplify the mental model to a restaurant. People can eat at a restaurant. They could say, I ate carne asada. It was delicious. 5 stars. And other people can say, I'm in the mood for carne asada. I'm going to that restaurant. And the business can stay out of it if they want to. People can just user to user generated content about carne asada all day long. But if the business wants to get in on the conversation, update its menu, update its pricing, basically interject themselves to decrease the friction to get a customer to come into their restaurant.
Yep.
That's the value proposition. It's basically a claiming of content and information about your business and setting up a stall or a booth digitally of marketing your business to people.
Yep.
The problem with, I think, and I didn't know this up front, but the problem with using Yelp as a mental model for PocketList was that obviously the transaction cost of a plate of carne asada and renting an apartment for 12 months is very, very different. Second of all, the frequency of turnover and the many-to-many relationship, right? With Yelp, many people can go to the same restaurant and order carne asada.
Yep.
There is a many-to-many relationship between eaters and carne asada plates.
Yeah.
With an apartment, there is a one-to-many relationship. There are many people that could rent an apartment, but only one person that does rent an apartment.
Yep.
It collapses into a one-to-one relationship.
Yeah. I do remember, well, speaking of the fundraising question, I do remember that was one of the objections that we got a lot during fundraising was like, oh, the frequency isn't fast enough for it to be. You have a person that comes in at most once a year to your platform. They come in, they look for an apartment, they share some data, they find an apartment, they're done. And so I do remember that being like a big hurdle that was hard for at least some cohort of VCs that we talked to.
I think though our answer to that was there's so many people that rent and they turn over more frequently than you'd think. I think our data was every 13 months someone turns over.
Yeah, but to your point about carne asada, it's not,
it's not like 70 times a night.
People go to, you get 70 tickets a night in a restaurant.
Yeah.
Versus, you own an apartment building with 10 people in it. Like they're going to turn over. You're going to get one a month, maybe turning.
I think it was the average multifamily property. The turnover rate on average is like 25%, meaning if you have 10 units, 2.5 of them are going to turn over every year.
Yeah.
And then the average tenancy is 13 months.
Right. So the 10 units, you're only dealing, if you own only one building with 10 units in it, you're dealing with this 2.5 times a month.
Yeah.
A year.
Yeah. The pivot business model behind PocketList was, I think, admirably more interesting and more sound, but involved, for it to have succeeded, it would have involved so much more money and time and engineering than we ever possibly could have had, even without a global pandemic causing eviction moratoriums, et cetera. But the pivot was, we're going to replace the background check and financial transaction piece of this.
Right.
That if we're collapsing, so our stats from memory were, we were on average decreasing the time to turn, which is a KPI that many property managers track. We were decreasing the time to turn by 21 days. That's 21 days of rent that they're getting that they wouldn't otherwise get, that they would otherwise be spending showing at open houses and going through the motions, right?
Yep.
And so the idea that not only were we going to build that list, hey, unit 1 just went on the market today, didn't even go on the market. Your prior tenant gave notice today on a Monday. And unbeknownst to you, property manager, it's been on this secret website for 2 months. And we have 20 people that want to rent it and want to meet you. And not only are we going to introduce them to you, but we've already done credit checks and background checks. They've already got a security deposit in a digital escrow account that they set up with us. we're going to streamline everything and compress the time it takes to take action on filling a unit. There is a ton of money there. There's a ton of money in background checking and credit checking. There's a ton of money in the financial transaction processing. And that is where we started to evolve. But I think the 1-2 punch of finding that out slightly too late, and by too late, I mean too long into our burn of the prior fundraising we'd done. 2, underestimating the technical and regulatory complexity of doing Fair Housing Act compliant background checks, et cetera.
Yeah.
And then 3, March 13th, 2020, the world shut down. And at least in Los Angeles and San Francisco, our 2 biggest cities, no landlords were going to be allowed to voluntarily turn over any units of inventory. We didn't know this at the time because we weren't psychics, but I don't think those moratoriums got lifted until December of 2022, which by that time we'd already shut down PocketList. It built a new thing and raised a new round for new companies. That was just crazy. Sorry, that was crazy. Does any of that ring false to you? Like, am I misremembering any numbers grossly?
But I think like to reel it back into where we started on the discussion on PocketList, it was sort of the question was how do I perceive PocketList to be because we differed on the answer, right?
Yeah, venture.
Like, is it a
venture-shaped business?
Venture-shaped or venture-compatible business. And I think had either of those business models worked out in a way where they were growing hand over fist, like if we found out landlords could not get enough of our product, then it would have made sense. But that's not what we found. There was a couple different reasons. Like there's a bunch of things we learned about, like just the real estate business in general, which is most like there's one, it's very stratified, right? Like there's like at the top end, there's like the giant corporations that own ungodly numbers of units, and most of them they're paying a lot of money for very sophisticated software, and it's very difficult for an upstart company to get into that market. There's the sort of middle tier of like I'm an independent owner, but I own like many buildings within a single geography, sometimes many geographies, depending how big the owner is. They are more sophisticated than a mom and pop, but still tend to be a little bit on the sort of I do things my way kind of mentality, where they're like, I don't need software. I have an office full of people that handle this for me, or I already pay apartments.com, or I already pay apartment list. Like, why do I need to add another thing to my software stack? And then there's like the mom and pops who are even more so that way. They're like, I do everything myself. I pinch every single penny. I'm not paying for any software, right? Yeah. And so there really wasn't. So for what we were offering, it didn't really feel like there was a natural customer in there. Does that make sense? Do you feel like I'm mischaracterizing that?
No, it's a good reminder of the cohorting. We talked a lot about that, and it had slipped my mind recently. And that a giant chunk of inventory is controlled by people that don't have, I think there's this mental image of the fat cat landlords, and I think I remember greater than 50% of rental inventory is like under 4 units. Like the owner owns under 4 units and is not sitting on giant piles of cash. Maybe if they're in a city like New York or LA, the value of their property is worth a lot, but they're not like throwing off.
Yeah. So like just thinking about the unit economics of it, right? Like if you're managing 4 units and we're bringing you new tenants for, like let's say you're managing 4 units, they're like $2,500 to $3,000 a month each. That means that, a typical finder fee would be somewhere on the order of like $500 to $1,000, because that's like, the annual lease value for that unit is $30,000, in the ballpark of $30,000. And like, that's the finder fee for $1,000. It's going to be about $1,000. An independent landlord is not going to want to pay you that money. Yeah. The most they're going to want to pay you is like $10 or $20 a month. Like if you're lucky, if they actually do want to spend money and they find value.
If they don't churn from your software as soon as they fill their unit.
As soon as they fill their unit, right? Yeah. And so like at that end of the spectrum, it doesn't, the unit economics just don't work out. Like they just don't make any sense. The middle tier was always interesting to me because they almost...
that was what we were gunning for initially.
Well, so the top end of the market, there's such a well-oiled machine that they almost didn't need what we were offering.
Yeah, some of the biggest property management companies in the world have their own like engineering, like software engineering teams that are doing data science on their inventory.
The middle tier, the interesting thing that I feel like we discovered was that their business is so good without our help that they're just kind of complacent.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Sure.
And like, I think
it also depends on the geographic market.
Yeah,
sure. Our bias is California, which has some of the most.
Yeah, like real estate's in demand, and so a landlord doesn't have to work that hard to find a tenant. Like they basically have their pick. Anytime any of their units goes vacant, they have their pick of anybody, like of a bunch of very qualified tenants.
Yeah. I also just remembered tangentially another bit of awful timing, and that added up to this failure, and it was April of 2020. Nothing to do with COVID. Do you know what I'm going to say? It was the iOS 14.5 update that implemented the app do not track privacy feature.
Speaking of unit economics,
which made all of our customer acquisition costs change unexpectedly and in unpredictable ways.
It was like I remember it was like a 3 or 4x overnight.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's just all of a sudden the CAC just exploded.
Yep.
And that was hard to deal with.
So we've been going for a while. We should probably wrap up, although this is making me realize that we've got so much to talk about, and I'm so excited to talk with you and learn from you more and share with our listeners, hopefully very interesting and helpful lessons.
We were kind of all over the place in this one.
Yeah, what's this going to be? What's this podcast going to be?
I don't know, man.
What do we even call it?
There's a couple different ways we can go, because we do have some things that we have cooking that we're excited about. Mm-hmm. And like, I don't know, I kind of want to, I think it's interesting to both look backwards but also focus on the present. So a lot of our stories are going to be useful to people to hear the lessons, and then just what we're doing now and how we're operating now given all those lessons, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. I almost feel like we should just get into a habit of doing it and just seeing where it takes us.
Yeah, I agree.
Maybe a little more, maybe slightly more structure than we have for this one, but
you know that I'm obsessed with naming things. Like, they don't feel real to me until they have a name. And so something about not having a name for this yet makes me uncomfortable. We can't call it Boops. I don't know. We talked about a couple things, right? We talked about like anatomy of failure, that it would be interesting to have kind of almost like a masters of scale, but instead of hyperscale success, it was failures. Cause I genuinely think that there's more to learn from failures than from success. Rolling tape, like it was a sport was another one we talked about. That, I don't know. It's also interesting to think like, are we going to interview people? Are we going to examine other companies and products that aren't ones that we've built?
Well, we can't talk about just PocketList and Heirloom forever. So
based on today, we could talk for
a while,
12 episodes probably about just PocketList. But yeah, you're right. I don't know.
Yeah, we didn't even talk about how we really got started.
Yeah. Okay. I think that is it for now. Name forthcoming. Thank you for listening. If you like what you hear, please share it with a friend. I'm Nick Dazé.
Like and subscribe.
Say your name and say goodbye.
I'm Julian Vergel. Dios. Thank you for joining us.
All right. See you next time.